Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Special Situations Report, a podcast by Inside Arbitrage covering the most intriguing event driven activity over the past week. In this podcast, we'll dive into the latest M&A activity, upcoming spinoffs, significant buybacks, unique insider buying, activist campaigns, and a whole lot more.
My name is Tamanna Suria, and I currently attend the University of California, Los Angeles.
And my name is Asif Suria, and I'm coming to you from the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area. This week, we will briefly discuss the acquisition of Walgreens Boots Alliance by Sycamore Partners, the acquisition of Chimerix by Jazz Pharmaceuticals, a new twist in the Lifeway Foods and Danone acquisition saga, insider purchases at the cybersecurity firm Fortinet and Park Hotels and Resorts, Starboard Value's involvement with Kenvue, and simultaneous CEO departures at both Kroger and Albertsons.
Before we begin, it's important to state that this podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only. The content does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. We do not warrant the completeness or accuracy of the content or data provided in this podcast. Nothing discussed in this podcast should be interpreted as a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any investment or security. Investing involves substantial risks, including the potential loss of principal. You should conduct your own research and due diligence before making any investment decisions.
So let's get this podcast started with developing M&A or deals in the works, as we like to call it. One of the first stories we covered on this podcast related to developing M&A or deals in the works was an offer by the French dairy products giant Danone, which made a $25 per share bid for Lifeway Foods last September and then upped the price to $27 by mid-November, only to be rejected by Lifeway both times. Lifeway currently trades at just $21.20 per share.
As we mentioned in that episode, Danone already owns 23% of Lifeway following an agreement with the company in 1999. Lifeway's current CEO, Julie Smolensky, took the reins of the business in 2002 after the death of her father, who was the founder of the company and struck that 1999 deal with Danone. Her brother, Edward, was the COO of the company until 2022, when he was terminated with cause. This started a battle between Edward and Julie, with Edward and his mother, Ludmila, publicly calling for the replacement of Julie as CEO. The two actually support the Danone acquisition and have a joint stake of nearly 30% in the company, while Julie owns about 18%.
So a little bit of a family feud going on there. Lifeway has actually called into question the 1999 agreement between the company and Danone, calling it, get this, illegal in the state of Illinois. They also adopted a poison pill and awarded Julie 283,000 shares. The latest twist in the saga is that according to that 1999 agreement, which Lifeway is claiming is illegal, this new share issuance that Julie got required consent from Danone. So Danone has now filed a lawsuit against Lifeway and each member of the board, including Julie.
Continuing on with fascinating deals in the works, last week we discussed an offer from the 23andMe CEO, Anne Wojcicki, and New Mountain Capital to acquire the company for $2.53 per share in cash. On February 28, 2025, New Mountain informed the company that it was no longer interested in participating in a potential acquisition of 23andMe and that it would discontinue discussions with Wojcicki and the special committee. Wojcicki revised her offer on March 2nd, indicating that she now wants to acquire 23andMe for just 41 cents per share in cash. Incredibly surprising considering that the company trades at $1.49. As you would expect, 23andMe rejected this new offer. While the company still has about $79 billion in cash on the balance sheet, they are also burning through more than $40 million each quarter, which doesn't look promising at all.
Certainly doesn't, and I was quite surprised when I saw that the deal price dropped from $2.53 to just 41 cents. So this is one of the risks of pre-deal situations without a definitive merger agreement. Now, continuing on with pre-deal situations, if you still have the appetite for that, I still like the hostile bid for QXO, or rather the hostile bid by QXO for Beacon Roofing Supply. We've talked about the company numerous times on our podcast, and we have a quick update. So QXO has now extended the tender offer once more to March 10th, with about 19% of the shares having been already tendered.
In other news related to this deal, Beacon actually announced that it has acquired the sealants and waterproofing distributor DM Figley. So Beacon's been able to make an acquisition, but QXO still has not.
And Brad Jacobs doesn't look like somebody who is going to stop or give up. So it'll be interesting to follow the situation and see how it eventually plays out. For final news on the deals in the work side of things, last week we also heard that the special committee at Howard Hughes found Bill Ackman and Pershing Square Capital's proposal not acceptable and entered into a standstill agreement until March 13th.
Now, that wasn't surprising at all, considering the 1.5% management fee on Howard Hughes' market cap that Pershing Square wanted to charge. In terms of recently announced M&A, Jazz Pharmaceuticals announced the acquisition of Chimerix for $935 million, or $8.55 per share in cash. They paid a very high premium of over 72% for Chimerix, but it was interesting to see that the deal did not include any contingent value rights or CVRs. Biotech deals where the target company is in clinical stage without an approved drug often have CVRs, so we were surprised to see this Chimerix and Jazz deal be the exception.
Chimerix's lead drug, and I'm going to butcher this name, dordaviprone, is being developed to treat a rare and aggressive brain tumor, mainly affecting children and young adults. There are no FDA-approved treatments for this mutation, with radiation being the standard of care. The FDA has accepted dordaviprone for priority review in recurrent cases, with a decision expected by August 18, 2025. If approved, it may qualify for a rare pediatric disease priority review voucher. A phase 3 trial is also testing dordaviprone in newly diagnosed patients after radiation, potentially expanding its use as a first-line treatment. So considering the fact that it's supposed to get a decision by August 18, 2025, that might to some extent explain why there's no CVR attached to this deal, given the near-term event that we might see.
Right, so over the course of the week, we also saw another rumored deal come to fruition when Sycamore Partners unveiled their plan to take Walgreens Boots Alliance private in a nearly $24 billion deal, which includes $11.45 per share in cash and one non-transferable right, also known as a divested asset proceed right, or DAP right, to receive up to $3 per share in cash for the future monetization of Walgreens Boots Alliance's debt and equity interests in Village MD. That was a mouthful. Walgreens stock closed at $11.39 per share, which implies some combination of the market thinking that there's some risk this deal won't play out, and or that the DAP right will not fully pay out.
Yeah, I would be surprised if this deal gets blocked. They also mentioned that financing has been in place to let this deal proceed. Village MD, in some sense, was Walgreens' answer to CVS rolling out little clinics inside their stores called Minute Clinics. Village MD actually consists of 3 different businesses. Village Medical, which are clinics located inside Walgreens stores or adjacent to them. Summit Health, which is a group of primary care, urgent care, and specialty clinics. And then finally, City MD, which is a chain of urgent care centers. The 3 businesses together are quite a large operation with 680 practice locations in 26 different markets. Walgreens had initially invested $1 billion in Village MD in 2020 and increased their investment by an additional $5.2 billion in 2021. Village MD acquired Summit Health and City MD in a $8.9 billion deal with Walgreens owning 53% of the combined company.
So now that we understand what Village MD is and how it fits into the Walgreens business, let's go back to those DAP rights. They entitle right holders to 70% of the net proceeds from the sale of Village MD assets that we just talked about, which is up to $3 per share. Stefano Pessina, who architected the creation of Alliance Boots through a series of acquisitions in Europe, and it was eventually the force of the merger of Walgreens with Alliance Boots in 2014, has his name all over this deal.
This deal brings back memories of Walgreens' failed attempt at acquiring smaller competitor Rite Aid in 2015. I had Rite Aid as a case study in my book, The Event-Driven Edge in Investing, and this was a cautionary case study of how every once in a while merger arbitrage does not work out. And I'm reading verbatim what I wrote about Stefano Pessina in that case study. Italian billionaire Stefano Pessina started his business empire by taking over his family's pharmaceutical wholesaler business in 1977. Through a series of mergers and acquisitions, the deal maker known as the Silver Fox ended up the CEO and executive chairman of one of the world's largest drugstore chains, Walgreens Boots Alliance. The chain operates the Walgreens and Duane Reade chains in the US, the Boots chain in the UK, and Benavides in Mexico. He stepped down from the CEO role in 2021, and the stock went on to lose 80% of its value in the next 4 years. The reason I bring all this up is because Stefano Pessina is not cashing out his stake in Walgreens and will instead roll over his 17% equity stake into the new private company. He's also going to be on the divested assets committee, which makes me think he's going to try to maximize the value from that Village MD divestiture. Village MD owns $3.4 billion in debt to Walgreens, and after that debt is paid back, DAP right holders will receive 70%, which is capped at $3 per share or about $2.7 billion.
To attempt to value these DAP rights, you could look at companies like Pediatrics Medical Group, which was previously known as Mednax and has a clever stock symbol of MD, as well as how much Amazon paid for One Medical. I guess LifeStance, which focuses on outpatient clinics for mental health, could also be a comparable. All three are different from Village MD in their own way, but they are all outpatient-focused medical practices as well.
Besides Rite Aid, this deal also reminds me of the failed merger of Staples and Office Depot, in which I was actually long Staples because I was worried that that deal might not go through. And just like Walgreens and Rite Aid, the deal was blocked by regulators. Staples was eventually acquired by a PE firm in 2017. And guess what? The firm that acquired them was also Sycamore Partners.
So good to see Sycamore likes picking up businesses had failed acquisitions in the past or mergers in the past. That all being said, we're going to move over to our buyback section, which we'll keep quite brief. We had two standout buybacks this week. Abercrombie and Fitch announced a $1.3 billion buyback, representing a whopping 30% of their market cap at announcement, so nearly 1/3 of the business. The other standout buyback was by Cinemark, which announced a $200 million buyback, representing about 7% of Cinemark's market cap at announcement.
Switching gears now to insiders. Even as the Nasdaq dropped about 10% into correction territory over the last few days, the floodgates opened up for insider buying. We have seen this often where insiders step up during periods of crisis or turmoil and start buying. The buying this week was broad-based, but energy sector insiders seem to be the most prolific buyers. We also saw consistent buying in Matador Resources for several days and saw buying in Expand Energy, the largest natural gas producer in the US that was created through the merger of Chesapeake Energy with Southwestern Energy.
A standout insider purchase worth covering was actually at one of the world's largest cybersecurity companies, Fortinet. Director William Newcomb made a small purchase of the company, only worth about $34,000, but what really stood out was his background. He's most known to the public as the former managing general partner of the San Francisco Giants baseball team specifically during the time period when the Giants won the World Series in 2010. He's actually a lawyer and was the former president of the American Bar Association as well.
Mr. Newcomb is a retired partner at KL Gates, which was a law firm created by merging with a firm that Bill Gates' father, William Gates Sr., was a co founder of. As such, Mr. Newcomb was the principal legal counsel at Microsoft for over 25 years and is now a lecturer at Stanford University. He's been with Fortinet as a director since 2013. This wasn't his first purchase of Fortinet. He's made quite a few over the last 5 years, and his timing has been excellent considering all that the stock has done is rise up 42% in the last year.
Right, and as a small side note, I was looking up Mr. Newcomb's background prepping for this podcast, and I noticed that we went to the same high school. Obviously, him many, many years before me, but that was a pretty cool thing to find out.
Probably before both of us were born, but yes, it's interesting to hear that. The insider purchase that I found the most interesting was the 20,000 share purchase by Thomas Eckert, a director of Park Hotels and Resorts. He has had a fascinating career where he has served as a director of the home builder NVR for more than 13 years and was also on the board of Chesapeake Lodging Trust for 9 years before it merged with Park Hotels and Resorts in a $2.5 billion transaction. I found his insider purchase of Park Hotels and Resorts interesting because he's an opportunistic buyer and seller, and we keep an eye out for opportunistic buyers and sellers. He was buying Chesapeake stock in 2011 and 2013, but then after that, mostly sold stock in 2016 and 2017. He did the same thing with NVR, which we know as a cannibal that is constantly buying back its own stock. In contrast, he's only purchased Park Hotel stock since 2020 and has never sold.
Park Hotels owns a large number of resorts and business hotels in urban locations. They own the Hilton Hawaiian Village in Oahu, as well as and I'm going to mess this name up, Hilton Waikoloa Village on the Big Island in Hawaii. We've been lucky enough to stay at the Hilton Hawaiian Village in Waikiki, and it's by far one of my favorite hotels, and I'm sure my family would agree. They also own the Waldorf Astoria in Orlando, and a couple of properties in the Florida Keys, including the Reach Key West. Overall, they have about 40 premium branded hotels and resorts with 25,000 rooms across the United States.
Yeah, as I was looking up this company, some of the properties just look fabulous. The other reason this purchase jumped out to us, not just because of the wonderful properties they own, was because we have a position in Pebblebrook Hotel Trust, a company that we also discovered on account of insider purchases, and that has a portfolio in many ways that is similar to Park Hotels. Unlike Pebblebrook, Park Hotels did reinitiate its dividend in the fourth quarter of 2022 after suspending it during the COVID years. In 2023, it paid a quarterly dividend of 15 cents per share, and then a nice big fat special dividend of 77 cents per share for the fourth quarter of 2023. The special dividend was classified as a return of capital because the company decided to get rid of its San Francisco hotels in 2023.
For 2024, Park Hotels bumped up the dividend to 25 cents per share and then paid another special dividend in Q4 of 40 cents. Using just the 25 cents per share quarterly dividend, or $1 per year, the dividend yield based on the current price of $11.88 per share works out to a very generous 8.42%. GAAP earnings per share were $1.02 in 2024 as well.
That might make it look like the dividend is very large, but since this is a REIT, you have to consider funds from operations or FFO instead. FFO for the last 4 quarters was $2.05 in compared to the $1.02 of GAAP earnings. So the dividend is more than covered, and we might even see another special dividend this year. Just like Pebblebrook, Park Hotels is also trading well below book value, and so the company has been buying back its own stock. They've repurchased about 12% of their shares outstanding over the last 3 years.
Key risks and concerns here are that the debt maturities will increase the interest rate on their debt and hence impact earnings. The bigger concern is that if we fall into a recession, Discretionary spending on hotels, especially high-end resorts, will take a hit. It also doesn't help that the US is losing friends and allies rapidly, which could have an impact on the number of foreign tourists coming into the United States.
which is something that could impact both Park Hotels and Pebblebrook. Speaking of Pebblebrook, we actually saw another insider purchase of the company, this time by somebody new. We are used to seeing Chairman and CEO John Potts purchase shares, but this week, director Michael Schall also purchased $118,000 worth of Pebblebrook shares. Mr. Schall is the CEO of multifamily REIT Essex Property Trust, a company he has been with since 1986. So he has some solid experience in the REIT space, which is always positive to see.
Okay, so moving away from insider transactions now, and to a quick note on the activist side of things. And for once, when we're talking about activists, we're not talking about Elliott. Another investment firm, or activist firm, sorry, Starboard Value, has been engaged in a proxy war with the consumer health company Kenvue, which is known for brands such as Band-Aids and Neutrogena, and was spun out of Johnson & Johnson in May 2023. Starboard only has a 1.1% stake in Kenvue, but criticized the company for poor performance in the skin health and beauty segments.
I still remember when Kenvue was spun out of Johnson & Johnson. That was an interesting spin-off because if I'm not mistaken, you had this option to exchange your shares and either retain Johnson & Johnson or keep Kenvue shares. Starboard had proposed that its CEO Jeffrey Smith and three other candidates join Kenvue's board. This week, Kenvue announced the appointment of two new directors that weren't part of Starboard's nomination slate, but Jeffrey Smith could still be joining the company's board, thus ending the proxy war.
Speaking of board related changes, let's transition over to C suite transitions, as I always like to say. It's been super interesting to see that both Kroger and Albertsons have lost their CEOs, especially given the massive Albertsons and Kroger deal that failed in December 2024. Kroger's CEO, Rodney McMullen, resigned effective immediately on March 3rd. The company made clear that this was not a resignation that was tied to Kroger's financial performance or its operations. Instead, and shockingly enough, the board had been made aware of certain personal conduct by Mr. McMullen, which led to an internal investigation. So very, very big news there. Mr. McMullen had served as Kroger's CEO for over 10 years.
Albertsons also announced that their CEO Vivek Sankaran, who had been CEO for 6 years, had notified the board of his intention to retire on May 1st, 2025. So, not a sudden departure on that front. We usually classify sudden departures as executives leaving within 30 days of the announcement. But it's still interesting to see that both companies lost their CEOs. Albertsons actually sued Kroger after the deal was terminated, claiming Kroger willfully breached the merger agreement in several ways, including by repeatedly refusing to divest assets necessary for antitrust approval, ignoring regulators' feedback, rejecting stronger divestiture buyers, and failing to cooperate with Albertsons.
The whole Albertsons and Kroger situation always reminds me that there's never a dull moment in the special situations world. There's always something fascinating going on. The other C-suite transition wasn't as dramatic as the Albertsons and Kroger one. The ethanol production and energy services company, Green Plains, announced a sudden departure of their president and CEO, Todd Becker. Mr. Becker had been with the company for a whopping 17 years, although the stock is down about 69% during his tenure. I don't think that's all his fault, though. Ethanol production is a notoriously difficult business and industry, and there's been a lot of debate when it comes to land use for ethanol production being used for food production instead. As such, that makes ethanol as a green fuel or alternative not very feasible on a large scale.
I have an interesting story related to Green Plains. I was at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting in Omaha last year, and there was a dinner that I was invited to. And I happened to strike up a conversation with somebody during the dinner, and he happened to tell me that he was part of the management team at Green Plains. And so I mentioned to him that the name Green Plains rings a bell, and he asked me why. And I told him it was probably an insider purchase a couple of months ago that I had noticed at the company. So we pulled up Inside Arbitrage, we looked at the insiders, and to both our surprise, the insider that actually purchased shares was the person who was hosting the dinner and was on the board of directors of Green Plains. So small world sometimes where you see an insider purchase by a company and then you happen to see that insider who was the person hosting this dinner for all of us.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll wrap up episode 9 of the Special Situations Report. As always, what we've covered today is a brief overview of the special situations landscape. So if you'd like to access a more comprehensive weekly overview of all event-driven activity, go ahead and visit our website, thespecialsituationsreport.com, for daily updates and alerts on the special situations world, as well as access to tools to help you identify opportunities, such as the merger arbitrage tool. Check out insidearbitrage.com.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe on whatever platform you may be listening on, and especially share it with your friends who are interested in special situations. Thank you.